when my daughter told me to clean her house and gave her $1,000 on Christmas morning. I didn't say a word. I just smiled, the kind of smile that hides years of love, pain, and disbelief, and I said, "All right, dear." That's how the last Christmas we ever spent together began. You see, I didn't mind cleaning. I've spent my whole life cleaning homes, hearts, and memories. But that day, something inside me broke in a quiet way. It wasn't just about money. It wasn't even about the chores. It was about realizing that somewhere between all the birthdays, the school nights, and the lullabies, my daughter had stopped seeing me as her mother and started seeing me as a burden. That's a hard thing for a mother to admit. Harder still when you've loved your child more than life itself. My name is Margaret, but most people just call me Grandma Maggie. Thank you, my dear ones, for listening to my story today. It's not an easy one to tell, but maybe it will help someone out there remember what love truly means. If you're watching this on our channel, don't forget to subscribe and share your own story in the comments. And tell me, where are you from? I love hearing about families from all over the world, because no matter where we live, our hearts feel pain and love the same way. I raised my daughter, Laura, mostly on my own. Her father passed when she was just 7. Back then, life wasn't easy, but we had each other, and that was enough. We lived in a small 2-bedroom house at the end of Willow Street. The kind with peeling paint and a porch that creaked whenever you stepped on it. But inside, it was filled with warmth. We had hand-stitched curtains, a small Christmas tree we used every year, and a radio that never quite tuned right but played just enough to fill the silence. Laura was a bright child, sharp, full of life. She used to draw pictures of me on little scraps of paper and say, "Mommy, one day I'll buy you a big house, and you'll never have to work again." I would smile and say, "I don't need a big house, sweetheart. Just you." And for many years, that was true. But life has a strange way of testing love. When Laura grew older and went away for college, I thought she'd still call home every week like she promised. At first she did. Then the calls grew fewer. And one day, I realized I was waiting by the phone more often than hearing it ring. Still, I was proud of her. She worked hard, got a good job in the city, and eventually married a man named Ryan. He was polite enough. He didn't say much, but he treated her well, at least in the beginning. I remember the first time they invited me to visit their new home. It was big, so big I felt small just stepping into it. Laura hugged me, but it was a quick, distracted hug. She was already talking about work, about friends, about a life that seemed to have no space for the quiet woman who raised her. I didn't blame her. Life changes people. But that visit, it was the first time I felt like a guest in my own daughter's life. Years passed. I moved into a small apartment closer to town. I spent my days tending to a little garden behind the building, feeding birds, knitting sweaters for the neighbors' children. Every Christmas, I waited for Laura's call. Sometimes she called. Sometimes she didn't. But last year, she did. And she said, "Mom, why don't you come spend Christmas with us this year? Bring a little cheer to the kids." Her voice sounded cheerful, but there was something rehearsed about it, like she was inviting me out of obligation. Still, my heart fluttered with excitement. I baked cookies, wrapped small gifts, and even saved up a bit of money to give my grandchildren. I wanted it to be special, maybe even a chance for us to grow close again. When I arrived at Laura's house that December morning, snow had just started falling. The air smelled like pine and cinnamon. I carried a small suitcase and a basket of gifts. The front door opened, and there she was, beautiful, confident, perfectly dressed as always. "Mom, you made it," she said with a quick smile, kissing me on the cheek. Then she looked behind me. "Did you bring the food?" "The pies." I smiled softly. "Just the cookies and some small things, dear." Her smile faded slightly. "That's fine. I just have a lot going on." I stepped inside. The house was full of laughter, Ryan's friends, music playing, children running up and down the stairs. But no one seemed to notice me. I stood by the doorway, holding my bag, waiting for someone to say hello. After a few moments, Laura turned to me and said, "Mom, why don't you make yourself useful and start tidying up the kitchen? It's a mess." Her tone wasn't cruel, but it wasn't kind either. And I, like a mother who's always said yes, nodded and went straight to work. I spent the next few hours washing dishes, wiping counters, and clearing out the sink piled high with plates. Every time I looked up, I saw Laura laughing with her friends, holding a glass of wine, her face glowing. Once, one of them asked, "Who's that helping in the kitchen?" Laura replied lightly, "Oh, that's just my mom. She loves to keep busy." Just my mom. I smiled through it, of course. Mothers learn how to hide hurt better than anyone. Later, when everyone went out to take family pictures by the big Christmas tree, I stood behind the camera, taking their photos. When they looked back at the pictures, I noticed I wasn't in any of them. Still, I told myself, it's okay. I'm here. That's enough. But things got worse. That evening, as I was folding napkins, Laura walked up to me. She looked tense, tapping her phone against her palm. "Mom," she said quietly, "I need a favor. A big one." I looked at her, waiting. She sighed. "I need you to lend me $1,000. Just until next week. I promise I'll pay you back." I blinked. $8,000. "But, Laura, I don't." She cut me off. "You always say you have savings. I need it now. Things are tight, okay? Just help me out for once." For once. Those words stung. I had spent my whole life helping her, every single time she needed anything. But I didn't argue. Instead, I nodded slowly. "If it means that much to you, I'll see what I can do." She smiled faintly, kissed my cheek, and said, "Thanks, Mom. Oh, and please, clean up the living room too before you go to bed. It's a mess." That night, I sat on the couch long after everyone had gone upstairs. I stared at the Christmas lights twinkling softly. In their reflection, I saw a mother who had given everything, and was now invisible in her own child's home. The next morning, I woke before dawn. I cleaned the rest of the house, every room, every dish, every forgotten glass. Then, I went into town and withdrew the money from my small savings account. It wasn't easy, that was my emergency fund. But I did it because I believed maybe this would show her how much I still cared. When I came back, the house was quiet. Laura was still asleep. I placed the envelope on the kitchen table, right under the small vase of red flowers she loved. Then I wrote a note. "I've cleaned the house like you asked, sweetheart. The money is in the envelope. Merry Christmas. Love always, Mom." After that, I packed my small suitcase. Outside, the snow had started falling again, gentle, almost peaceful. I called a taxi and stood by the door for a moment, looking back at the spotless house, the faint sound of carols playing upstairs. I whispered, "Merry Christmas, Laura," and closed the door behind me. The taxi drove slowly through the snow. As I watched the house disappear behind me, my heart felt both heavy and strangely light. I didn't cry at first. I just stared at the white streets, the quiet morning. The driver hummed softly to himself. When he dropped me at the bus station, he looked at me in the mirror and said kindly, "Ma'am, you heading home?" I smiled faintly. "Yes, I think I am." Inside the small waiting room, the heater rattled. A few travelers sat with cups of coffee, bundled in scarves. I found a seat near the window. Outside, the snow kept falling, soft, endless, peaceful. And that's when the tears came. Not loud ones. Just small, quiet drops that fell before I could stop them. I wasn't crying because of the money or the cleaning. I was crying because I finally understood I had become a stranger in my daughter's life. After a while, an older woman sat next to me. She looked at me kindly and said, "You okay, dear?" I nodded, wiping my eyes. "Just a long morning." She smiled gently. "Christmas mornings can be heavy, can't they?" We talked for a bit, about her grandchildren, about the weather. Nothing deep, but her presence comforted me. When my bus arrived, she squeezed my hand and said, "Whatever it is, you'll be all right." The ride home took 4 hours. I watched the fields and frozen trees pass by like old memories. When I reached my little apartment, the rooms were cool, but they felt like safety. I set down my bag, hung up my coat, and stood quietly in the middle of the room. The silence was thick, but it didn't scare me. I made tea, sat by the window, and watched the snow continue to fall. That was the moment I decided not to call Laura. Not to ask if she got the money or saw the note. Something in me said it was time to stop chasing love that didn't want to be got. Days passed. Christmas turned into the new year. Then one evening, about 2 weeks later, I got a call from Laura. Her voice was shaky. "Mom, where did you go?" I hesitated. "Home." There was silence on the line. Then she said, almost accusingly, "Why would you leave like that? You didn't even say goodbye to the kids." I swallowed. "I thought you had everything you needed, dear." She sighed. "You didn't have to take it so personally. I was just stressed. You know how holidays are." I wanted to say 1,000 things, to remind her of my note, my tears, my effort, but I didn't. Instead, I said softly, "It's all right, Laura. I understand." She muttered something about being busy and ended the call quickly. That was the last time I heard her voice. A month later, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, just my name. Inside was the same envelope I had left on her table, still full of the money. No note. No explanation. Just the money, sealed tight. I held it in my hands and felt something deep inside me shift. It wasn't anger this time. It was acceptance. Sometimes people return what they cannot carry, not the money, but the guilt. I placed the envelope in my drawer and whispered, "Thank you for returning it." And I never tried to reach out again. The following spring, life began to feel gentle again. I spent mornings tending to my small balcony garden, planting herbs and flowers. The sun felt warmer. The world felt lighter. Sometimes, the neighbors' children would knock on my door, asking if I had cookies or stories. I always said yes. They reminded me of the years when Laura was small, her laughter, her drawings, her questions about the world. And though it hurt, I also felt grateful that I'd once had those moments at all. One Sunday, while I was watering the plants, a young woman from the building next door stopped by. Her name was Sophie. She lived alone and often borrowed sugar or tea. She said, "Miss Maggie, I made extra soup today. Would you like some?" I smiled. "That's kind of you, dear. Thank you." We sat on the balcony eating soup and watching the sunset. She talked about her job, her worries, her dreams. Then she said quietly, "I haven't spoken to my mom in years." We argued, and I just stopped calling. I looked at her, my spoon halfway to my mouth. She went on, "Sometimes I miss her. But I don't know how to fix it." I took a deep breath and said softly, "Sometimes fixing it starts with one small call. You don't need to say everything. Just say hello." She nodded slowly, eyes glistening. "Maybe I will." That night, after she left, I sat by the window thinking about how life has a way of sending you people who carry pieces of your story. And I realized something. Even if Laura never came back, maybe my purpose wasn't to be loved by her anymore. Maybe it was to love others who still needed a mother's warmth. So I started volunteering at the local shelter. I cooked meals, folded blankets, and listened to stories from people who had lost everything. And in their stories, I found healing. One elderly man once told me, "You remind me of my mother. She always forgave me, no matter how foolish I was." I smiled. "Maybe she's still forgiving you, wherever she is." He wiped his eyes and whispered, "Maybe." Months turned into a year. Then, one afternoon, as I was leaving the shelter, I saw Sophie running toward me, tears streaming down her face. "I called her," she said, gasping. "I called my mom. She cried. She wants to see me." I hugged her tightly. "That's wonderful, dear. You did the right thing." And as she cried into my shoulder, I realized that maybe, just maybe, helping her reconnect was the universe's way of giving me peace. Because every time I helped someone else heal, a small piece of my own heart healed too. Then came another Christmas. The world outside was white again, silent and bright. I decorated my little tree, hung the same old ornaments, and baked cookies, not because anyone was coming, but because it made me happy. That evening, just as I sat down with my tea, there was a soft knock at the door. When I opened it, I saw a small girl standing there, Sophie's niece. She held out a plate of cookies and said, "Merry Christmas, Miss Maggie. Mom says thank you for helping Aunt Sophie." My eyes filled with tears. "Oh, sweetheart, you didn't have to." She smiled. "Mom says you're like everyone's grandma now." I laughed softly. "That's a lovely thing to say." After she left, I sat at the table, looked at the candle flickering beside me, and whispered, "I guess I am everyone's grandma now." It's been 5 years since that Christmas morning, the one that broke my heart but gave me back my peace. Laura never called again. Sometimes I still look at the phone, wondering if she ever thinks of me. Maybe she does. Maybe she doesn't. But either way, I'm no longer waiting. I've learned that love isn't measured by who stays. It's measured by how gently you can let go when they leave. Every Christmas now, I light a candle for her, not out of sadness, but out of hope. I whisper, "Wherever you are, Laura, I love you." And I mean it. Because forgiveness doesn't need an audience. It's something you do quietly, in your own heart, when you're ready to be free. Sometimes, People ask me how I can still smile after everything. I tell them, because I stopped waiting for others to give me peace. I started giving it to myself. That's the lesson my story taught me, that peace isn't found in being needed. It's found in knowing your worth, even when no one else does. Grandma Maggie's voice. Thank you, my dears, for listening to my story. If it touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're from. And if you have your own story, share it. Because sometimes telling your truth helps someone else find their strength.